Instruction will be presented from the ICD-10 CM External Causes Index and Tabula in a step-by-step scenario involving an injury to a man caused by using gel hand sanitizer. Mr. Chapstick is camping out under a bridge on a cold, crisp evening. The night sky is clear, the moon is full, and there are few cars out at that late hour. He is not dressed for the outside temperature and ponders how to keep warm. A thought races through Mr. Chapstick's mind. Hey, what if I start a small campfire to keep myself warm? Mr. Chapstick gets up and picks up a white container he sees next to the trash can. Mr. Chapstick rummages through the trash, choosing the thickest paper he finds. Mr. Chapstick uses a gel hand sanitizer because he has a hand-washing compulsion and fears contamination from rummaging through the trash. Pump, pump, pump. He saturates his hands, and into the pocket it goes. Next, he places paper under the wood to create the flame. He then lights a match, and instantly the fire consumes Mr. Chapstick. The flames rose in seconds, and Mr. Chapstick's face, chest, hands, and arms are consumed with fire. Mr. Chapstick jumps up and down in despair. Oh, his pitiful lament can be heard throughout the streets above. Mr. Chapstick was in excruciating pain. Ambulance drivers tell Mr. Chapstick not to worry. They are on their way to the hospital expeditiously. Mr. Chapstick is immediately transported to the burn unit of the Walking Stick Hospital. Dr. Stickmeyer examines Mr. Chapstick and discusses the injuries and treatment plan with him. The emergency room physician prepares the documentation for Mr. Chapstick and notes that the patient has first-degree burns to the face, second-degree burns to 9% of the right arm, third-degree burns on the trunk of the body and left arm for a total of 25%. Let's get ready to code the injuries to Mr. Chapstick and the circumstances that describe the place of occurrence, activity, and status codes.
The University of Texas at Austin wrote an article about the increase in hand sanitizer use after the COVID epidemic. The article discussed the use of ABHS products and the dangers of the alcohol they contain. Fire hazards are likely if this product is not stored carefully. Some warnings were to keep hand sanitizer away from an ignition source, such as an open flame or an electrical spark. This is where I got the idea for the fire igniting after Mr. Chapstick saturated his hands with hand sanitizer. An important thing to think about is that reading, listening, and remembering are the best things to do in student life. If you are familiar with the ICD-10 CM coding process, the same concept applies. The more you practice coding, the better you will become. Let's start off with the guidelines in ICD-10 CM for burns. If you are ready, we will cover some of the burn guidelines. You can follow by opening the ICD-10 CM coding manual to the burn guidelines. Some of the guidelines will be discussed more than once in this presentation. Except for sunburns, the ICD-10-CM rules provide burn codes for thermal burns caused by a heat source such as a fire or hot appliance. A chemical burn is referred to as a corrosion. Both forms of burns have the same treatment recommendations. As with other injuries, distinct codes must be assigned to each burn location. Codes are available for several locations, but they should only be used if the documentation does not allow for the assignment of more specific burn codes. The degrees of burn severity are first degree burn, which is cutaneous erythema or redness. Second degree burns cause blistering and epidermal loss. Third degree burn is complete skin loss. Fourth degree burn is underlying tissue necrosis or deep third degree burn. The guidelines direct the coder to start with a code that represents the maximum degree of burn. Burns and corrosions are coded with categories T20 to T32. ICD-10-CM distinguishes between burns and corrosion. The burn codes are used to report thermal burns that come from a heat source, such as a fire or hot appliance. The burn codes are also used for burns resulting from electricity and radiation. Corrosion is a burn due to chemicals. So how will we sequence burn codes? The highest degree of burns is sequenced first. Burns of same local site, code range T20 to T28, different degrees. These are classified to subcategory, identifying the highest degree recorded in the diagnosis. In ICD-10-CM, what must be documented and coded is based on the following. 1. Whether it is a burn or corrosion. Burn codes apply to thermal burns, except sunburns that come from a heat source, such as fire or a hot appliance. They include electricity and radiation burns. Corrosions are burns due to chemicals. The guidelines are the same for burns and corrosions. Next, burns are classified by depth: first degree, second degree, third degree. Then, location of burn site. And finally, laterality in many cases. Let's discuss coding total body surface area, which is also known as TBSA, for burns or corrosions. When coding a third-degree burn, an additional code is applied to one of the following categories. T31 burns are categorized based on the extent of the affected body surface. T32 corrosions are classified based on the extent of the affected body surface. These codes are used to represent total body surface area burned and should be reported whenever a third-degree burn with 20% or more TBSA is mentioned, and this is per official coding guidelines. Categories T31 and T32 are based on the classic rule of nines in estimating body surface involved. For example, head and neck is 9%. Each arm equals to 9%. Each leg is 18%. The anterior trunk is 18%. The posterior trunk is 18%. And the genitalia is 1%. Here is a coding tip for you. Burns are classified by site, depth, and degree. Now we will discuss the sequencing of the burn codes. The first sequence code is the code that reflects the highest degree of burn when more than one burn is present. When the reason for the admission or encounter is for treatment of external multiple burns, you will sequence first the code that reflects the burn of the highest degree. You will assign separate codes for each burn site. Burns and corrosions are classified according to the extent of the body surface involved. You will assign codes from category T31, burns classified according to extent of body surface involved, or T32, corrosions classified according to extent of body surface involved, when the site of the burn is not specified or when there is a need for additional data. It's best to use category T31 as additional coding when needed to provide data for evaluating burn mortality, such as that needed by burn units. It is also advisable to use category T31 as an additional code for reporting purposes when there is mention of a third-degree burn involving 20% or more of the body surface. An external cause code is used to identify the source, place, and intent of the burn. ICD-10-CM guidelines recommend reporting appropriate external cause codes for burn patients. So if you're ready, we will begin to assign burn codes using the ICD-10-CM coding manual. For this presentation, I will be using the 2023 Bucks ICD-10-CM for hospitals. The first step is to look for the main term in the alphabetic index. Next, confirm the ICD-10 code from the alphabetic index in the tabular list. An important rule to remember is that the search for the diagnosis begins in the alphabetic index. The first step is to identify the main term. The main term is a diagnosis that describes the reason why a patient seeks help from a medical provider. The diagnosis is a condition such as an illness, injury, or disease. The main term is usually in bold print in the alphabetic index. As we work on coding diagnoses, I will show you what to look for. The diagnoses are second-degree burn to the right arm and a third-degree burn to the chest and the left arm. The first step is to identify the main term for the diagnosis. The diagnosis is burn. Next, we will look for the body site as a subterm for the highest degree burn. The highest degree burn is for the chest. You will be guided to code T21.31. We determine the main term is burn. The body site is chest for the highest degree burn. Therefore, chest wall is a subterm. Third degree is the highest degree identified in the patient's diagnosis. In the alphabetic index, burn of the chest wall. Third degree leads us to ICD 10 CM code T21.31. The next step is to confirm the ICD 10 CM code T31.21 that we located in the alphabetic index in the tabular list of diseases and injuries. In the tabular list, we located T21.31. Notice the X and the stop sign symbols. So, what do these symbols mean? The red stop sign cautions that the code requires an additional character or characters to ensure the greatest specificity. For codes less than 6 characters that require a 7th character, a placeholder X should be assigned for all characters less than 6. The 7th character must always be the 7th character of a code. So far, we have covered the alphabetic index, the tabular list, symbols, and the ICD 10 CM code. All categories are 3 characters. Subcategories are either 4 or 5 characters. Codes may be 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 characters. A code that has an applicable 7th character is considered invalid without the 7th character. The X is used as a placeholder at certain codes to allow for future expansion. Where a placeholder exists, the X must be used in order for the code to be considered a valid code. Certain ICD-10-CM categories have applicable seventh characters. The applicable seventh character is required for all codes within the category, or as the notes in the tabular list instruct. The seventh character must always be the seventh character in the data field. If a code that requires a seventh character is not 6 characters, a placeholder X must be used to fill in the empty characters. We are ready to put it together. Let's focus on the guidelines of sequencing of burn and related condition codes. First, we sequence the code that reflects the highest degree of burn when more than one burn is present. And T21.31 is for the third degree burn of the chest. Also, there is treatment of external multiple burns, and we will talk a little bit more about that in the next few minutes. T21.31 still requires 2 additional characters. So back to the X placeholder. Refer back to the symbols in the ICD-10-CM tabular list for instructions. For codes less than 6 characters that requires a 7th character, a placeholder X should be assigned for all characters less than 6. The 7th character must always be the 7th character of a code. What is the 7th character? The information under category code T21 provides the information. A stands for initial encounter, D is for the subsequent encounter, and S is for sequela. ICD-10-CM code T21.31XA is correct for the third degree burn of the chest. We coded the highest degree burn of the chest. The left arm also suffered a third degree burn. Now we will follow the same process to code for the third degree burn of the arm. Let's take a look at the alphabetic index to search for the main term burn. We will now search the alphabetic index for the main term burn to locate the code for the third degree burn of the arm. There is an instructional note next to the body site arm to see burn upper limb. The third degree burn is on the arm, which is the upper limb. The alphabetic index guides the coder to ICD-10-CM code T22.30. The next step is to confirm this code in the tabular list. T2230, according to the tabular, describes the third degree burn of the arm. We still have 2 characters to complete the code. Go back to the guidelines and assign the last character. A for initial encounter is the correct 7th character. ICD-10 code T22.30XA is for the third degree burn of the arm. According to the guidelines, the lowest degree burn is sequenced after the highest degree burn. You will still follow the coding path and add additional characters based on symbols next to the ICD-10 code in the tabular list. There was also a second degree burn to the right arm. The alphabetic index led us to the second degree burn of the upper limb, ICD-10 code T22.20. Next, we will reference the tabular list. The code T22.20 requires an X placeholder character and a 7th character based on the symbols next to the code. If you recall, the 7th character of A identifies an initial encounter, and the letter D is for a subsequent encounter. The correct ICD-10 code is T22.20XA. Earlier, we discussed the rules of nines. I will go over these rules again. Categories T31 and T32 are based on the classic rules of nines in estimating body surface involved. The head and the neck are 9%. Each arm is 9%. Each leg is 18%. The anterior trunk is 18%. The posterior trunk is 18%. The genitalia is 1%. And here's a coding tip for you. Burns are classified by site, depth, and degree. The total body surface area is 34%. This percentage came from adding the 9% second degree burn and the 25% third degree burn. Look in the alphabetic index for burn extent, percentage of body surface, 30 to 39%, with 20 to 29% third degree burns. The alphabetic index guides us to code T31.32. The tabular confirms T31.32 is the correct ICD-10 code. 25% of that is the third-degree burn. Therefore, T31.32 is the correct answer. The ICD-10-CM codes in sequence are T21.31XA, T22.30XA, T22.20XA, and T31.32. If you are ready, we will apply more burn diagnoses. This time, we will also use the external causes index and confirm the code or codes in the tabular. Let's extract the diagnosis from this unfortunate accident. A 4-year-old boy was rushed to the emergency room after the mother found her son screaming in pain in the laundry room. The nurse in the emergency department cleaned the wound. The child suffered erythema and blisters on his right wrist caused by an iron left on the floor. The diagnoses are blisters and erythema. We are aware that the hot iron is what caused the blisters and erythema. When we look at the alphabetic index for the main term blister, we are guided by a C instructional note. Under the main term erythema, we see a subterm heat with an instructional note to code by site under the main term burn and a subterm first degree. Earlier, we discussed the degrees of burn severity. Recall that first-degree burns is cutaneous erythema or redness. Second-degree burns cause blistering and epidermal loss. Now, we will search the alphabetic index for the main term burn. The body site is the wrist. The second-degree ICD-10-CM code is T23.272. Next, we will confirm if the code in the tabular is the correct code for the right wrist. Take a moment to locate the code in the tabular list. You may pause the video and start it after you locate the correct ICD-10-CM code. The alphabetic index guided us to ICD-10-CM code T23.272. We know from seeing the stop sign symbol that an extra character is required. But wait! ICD-10-CM code T23.272 is for a burn of second degree of the left wrist. ICD-10-CM code T23.271 is for a burn of second degree of the right wrist. So T23.271 is correct. However, we're not done. T23.271 has a stop sign symbol on the left side of the ICD-10-CM code. So we still need to assign the seventh character from category T23. Which letter character is appropriate based on the patient's encounter? Do you recall what each letter signifies? The correct code is T23.272A. According to the guidelines, you should never sequence an external cost code as the first listed or primary diagnosis. You should instead use these external cost codes as supplementary codes to convey more information. External cost codes can provide you with the following useful information. Let's work together on retrieving the main terms for the external causes of circumstances. We also have to figure out how the injury occurred. The code describes the circumstance causing an injury, which was contact with a heating appliance. In the external cause of injuries index, the main term is burn, burned, burning. It was from a heat source, specifically an electrical appliance. We will refer to the ICD-10-CM code X15.8 in the tabular list. ICD-10-CM code X15.8 in the tabular list requires the placeholder X character and additional characters to make a total of 7 characters. A 7th character is also required. How many X characters are required to equal the 7 characters? The codes with the appropriate 7th character are assigned for each encounter for which the injury or condition is being treated. The 7th character identifies the timing of the care of the injury or condition. The 7th character A is for an initial encounter. All subsequent encounters are added during subsequent visits for care. Only the external cost code will be coded with the 7th character of D. Sequela situations, or later in time, when the patient continues to suffer from the consequences of the original problem that was caused by an external event. The complete code is X15.8XXA. Now we will work on the place of occurrence. Where did the injury or accident occur? Place of occurrence codes begin with Y92. When looking for the place of occurrence, the coder would reference the main term place of occurrence or place in the index. Place of occurrence codes should be reported after other external cost codes. Place of occurrence codes are typically only reported on the initial encounter for treatment and do not have a seventh character. Do not code an unspecified place of occurrence if the place is not specified or is not applicable. Where did the injury occur for the little boy who was burned by the iron? The accident occurred at the family home. Begin to search for the main term, place of occurrence, or place in the ICD-10-CM alphabetic index of external causes and injuries. We know the accident happened at the family home. The subterms are residence and home single family, which leads you to ICD-10 code Y92.019. The tabular list provides ICD-10-CM code Y92.019. There aren't any symbols indicating extra characters or information are required. Y92.019 is the complete code. The ICD-10-CM codes are T23.271A, X15.8XXA, and Y92.019. The ICD-10-CM guidelines state if a patient has multiple burns on the same anatomical site identified by a code, select the code that reflects the most severe burn for that location. Therefore, an ICD-10-CM code is not required for the first-degree burn. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel.